Welcome to the only subreddit where justice is served in all the right ways. It's r/prorevenge. But, that's not justice, though. That's not justice. Just work on it. Basically, this subreddit is filled with all kinds of revenge stories, whether real or fake, and, we have an inkling for revenge. Especially in the current climate we're in right now. But like I said, welcome to r/prorevenge. Also, before we begin, my new single, I'll Call the Shots, is now available on iTunes, Google Play, YouTube Music, and eventually it'll be in Spotify. Probably by the time this video actually goes live. I mean, why go through all that effort when I could have easily put it on Bandcamp? There's a few reasons for it. For now, let's read some stories. She bullied all the kids, so I made sure everyone would know about it. So in the 8th grade, I had this English teacher named Mrs. Sam. Not her real name. Now, the first week she was really nice to all of us, but this was only because she was a new employee and there was always an invigilator watching her. But after the first week, her attitude started to worsen, and by the end of the first, when the invigilator stopped visiting, that's when things started getting out of hand. In the start, she was like any mean teacher, yelling at us for the slightest mistakes and giving us detention for coughing. She even gave a kid detention once because she said he was breathing too loud. She would also cut our marks in half for absolutely no reason, even though our answers were absolutely correct. But the worst was yet to come, and during a lesson, the most she would do was write the topic and the question on the board, and if anyone asked her what to do, she would give the detention. After the midterm, she got even more pissed off because nearly all of us failed except for the few who were good English speakers, and even those guys barely passed. And due to such a bad result, she was given a warning by the principal that if everyone didn't pass in the finals, then she would lose her job. Soon after, her outbursts became even more frequent and even more deadlier. She would often smack us in the back and would stomp on our foots, and us being the idiots we didn't tell anybody because she threatened to fail us if we did. One of the backbenchers, let's call him Jake, had the brilliant idea that we should all bring our phones to school and record what she did in our classes. So we did as he told us, and we did this 2 weeks before the finals. She wrote the topic and sat down, and that day, one of the kids had a sore throat, so he started coughing. Better get him one of these or, it's gonna be bad news. And so she gave him detention. But the poor kid couldn't stop coughing, so she got up from her seat and smacked him on the head and started cussing. But all the while this was going on, the entirety of the class was recording everything and got every angle, and it clearly showed what she was doing. We then showed this to the principal, who immediately fired her and blacklisted her, but told us to delete the video as this would hurt the school's reputation. But once we got out of middle school, one of the kids uploaded it, and after that, no one would hire Sam. Now, to me, that last part seemed excessive, as in my mind, I thought we were just teaching her a lesson, not destroying her life. Well, I would argue that if a teacher is trying to intentionally hurt the students there, you probably should have your life destroyed. Unlike the last subreddit I did, where I could easily filter the short and the long stories, it's just not there. So, in this video, I'm just gonna be reading what catches my eye. He ruined my sister's only birth experience, so I made sure he'd never forget her. Oh my god, this is a long one. Well, here we go. We've got a long one here, so this'll be the only other of the other two. Obligatory apology for formatting as I'm on mobile. Kinda my revenge, kinda my sister's. Both of us really proud. This is gonna be long, so TLDR at the bottom. Here's our cast, which is on the screen. When I was 14, my oldest sister, Sarah, was 22 when we found out that she was pregnant with Paul, her boyfriend of 4 years. They immediately got engaged and they were really happy. For a time. Sarah had a horrible pregnancy. About 16 to 18 weeks in the wondrous human life evaporated within her. She developed hyperemesis, which if you don't know is a really bad morning sickness. She was constantly in pain, she developed gestational diabetes, and just all around hated the experience. Around this time, Paul, the then fiance, started getting sick of the complaining. I believe the argument was... Oh god, my throat. Sarah was due around Valentine's Day, and Paul's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Doe, were very excited, both about the grandkid and the fact that he could be born on a holiday. She was very against that and really hoped that her son wouldn't be born on a holiday. Even one as small as Valentine's Day. Her birthday sometimes falls on Easter and she hates it because it may make him feel that his day isn't very much about him. Well, Mrs. Doe says something like, well, if you name him Valentine or Valentino, then that'll make the day even more special to him. Again, Sister hated the idea. She thought it was tacky, he'd be bullied for it, and just didn't like the name Valentino. I'm gonna do that every single time Valentino is brought up. Paul loved it, but agreed to go with a more average name like Daniel or Jared. Fast forward to February, and she was ready to get this over with. Sarah had officially been put on bed rest because while standing or walking, her blood pressure took unexpected spikes and dips. I look back now and goodness, do I feel bad for her. She was doing her best to avoid giving birth on Valentine's Day because, again, she didn't want him born on a holiday. Unfortunately, births happen when they happen, and the baby was going to come on Valentine's Day, whether she wanted him to or not. I remember waiting out in the waiting room with my dad, brothers, and Paul, who couldn't stand to be in the delivery room because it was gross. I was so mad that he could have gone in but wouldn't because he thought my sister was gross while giving birth. Whereas I had to stay outside because I was too young to go in with my mom and other sister. Dad went home with the youngest two brothers while the oldest, Zeki, stayed to watch me because I refused to leave. 16 hours after Sarah went into labor, my little nephew was officially part of the family on the evening of Valentine's Day. Unfortunately, Sarah was not okay. She had to have an emergency C-section, and I'm not pronouncing that, and while doing the operation, discovered that the back of her uterus, facing her spinal cord, had a very large and very severe, thankfully not cancerous, tumor. When I say large, I mean it was twice the size of a standard uterus. The doctors were shocked and didn't understand why nobody hadn't noticed it on an ultrasound. It accounted for her severe back pain and blood pressure issues. The doctors immediately went in for more surgery to remove the tumor, but sadly ended up having to perform a full hysterectomy. This meant that my nephew would be Sarah's only child. Now, while Sarah was in for surgery, Paul was taking care of everything baby related to make sure his son was okay. In my 14-year-old self's memory, I could remember him being suitably distraught, but I didn't really pay him much mind and spend my time in the waiting room with my mother and other sister. Zeki, however, wanted to be a good future brother-in-law and made sure that Paul was okay. He found Paul filing out the baby paperwork on his own looking, in my brother's words, like he had not had a single worry in his mind. Zeki asked why Paul didn't wait for Sarah to fill out the paperwork as she should have been put out of surgery within the hour. And Paul said that he just wanted her to get some rest and heal. That checked out with Zeki, as he was 16 and didn't know any better at the time. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. No, he wouldn't. He hates how much he hates that man, and still, she needs to sign the paperwork too. My fellow peoples of Reddit, I regret to inform you that Paul forged Sarah's signature on the paperwork and waited until she was out of the surgery to hand said paperwork over. My sweet nephew, that was born on Valentine's Day, was named Valentino on his first official birth certificate. I still to this day don't know why Paul and his family were so insistent about the name. He had even picked out a different one with my sister. And before you ask, no, he was never brought up on forgery charges because his parents were witnesses to her signing the papers, even though they only got there at the last minute. So Sarah dumped him and got her son's name changed a month later. She was willing to do split custody with him because that's her son's father and she wants the kid to know him. But Paul vanished and she never heard anything back, which seemed weirdly out of character to us. until a mutual friend on Facebook was tagged in his wedding pictures 6 months later. Paul had apparently started cheating on her not long after she got pregnant. Sarah was livid, but there wasn't much she could do, so she filed for child support and continued to live her best life. Until 6 years later. This is where the revenge starts, my friends. So, Sarah had been a single mother for the past 6 years and has been amazing at it. At this point in my career, I'd been a hairdresser for about 8 months at our local Great Clips. Working one day, and who is seated before me but Jane, Paul's wife herself. I take her back for a trim, and she clearly has no idea who I am. That adds up because a mutual friend that still keeps in contact with Paul said that Jane doesn't know a thing. She has no idea about Sarah, that she was the other woman, or that Paul actually has a kid that he's been infrequently paying child support for. She's still dark on it all. I told myself not to be an ass and treat her like a normal customer, which I did. Now at this point, Jane was heavily pregnant, so a lot of our conversation was about that. She loved being pregnant, but it was hard. Her husband was so unsympathetic, big shocker, and she was due in 10 weeks, and they still hadn't picked out a name for their baby girl. Ladies and gentle peoples, this was my chance. I asked what kind of name she was looking for, and she said, "I want something unique and unusual, but not ridiculous like Plant Lady." You know the ones I'm talking about. And Paul had suggested so many, and she didn't like any of them. So I, the conniving little weasel I am, said, "What about Sarah?" My sister's name isn't actually Sarah. She was named after an older family member that passed not long after she was born. But there was no female equivalent for his name, so our parents created one. It's a beautiful name and just what Jane was looking for. She loved it, she stuck by it, and I found out by stalking her Facebook months later that she had put her foot down about it and that was her daughter's name. Now, Paul has a daughter with his ex's name to remind him every day about her. And also to remind him to pay his child support. Little nephew is 10 years old now with a new name and has no biological contact with his father. Though we do still sometimes call him Val as a family nickname. He likes it, but doesn't want to bring it to school, so it's staying a family nickname. Sarah pretends to hate when we call him that, in a joking way. As long as he likes it, she doesn't have a problem with it. And she's seeing a new guy who's really great and like a father to Val. TLDR. My sister's baby daddy forged her signature on paperwork while she was in surgery to name their son a name that she had been avidly against from the beginning. Then broke all contact when she dumped him and married the girl he was cheating on her with while she was pregnant. 6 years later, I meet his wife and convince her to name her daughter my sister's name because the wife has no idea my sister and her son exist. Whoa, that was a roller coaster. And I think that's where we're gonna end it, folks. This was a good subreddit, and if you want to check it out, I will leave a link for it in the description below. Anyways, make sure you leave a like button and smash that comment section, and I'll see you all next time. Later!
For years I've tried to please you and your ways. Why can't we